I want to move to a different issue, tariffs. So, appeals court slapped down Donald Trump's tariffs as illegal. And not just illegal, kind of made the point of saying the president doesn't have the powers to do this for taxes and tariffs in the way that Trump has been using it. Now, Trump has been making this argument that there's an emergency, there's something going on that I must get involved in at this moment, and so I'm doing tariffs on the entirety of the world. Now, of course, this argument kind of falls flat when it's, I don't like the fact that Brazil is going after balls and arrows, so I'm going to put tariffs on Brazil, which is like outrageous, right? I don't like the fact that they're buying Russian oil, so I'm going to put tariffs on India. Meaning he's putting tariffs on people and countries for things that have nothing to do with national emergencies and just have something to do with his own pet peeves. This is pretty extreme. I mean, even the tariffs on penguins. I don't know what penguins did to Donald Trump, but the tariffs on penguins also is one of those items that raises eyebrows. Well, the court has effectively slapped it down. Now, they're letting it stay in until October 23rd, where Trump is probably going to go to Supreme Court. But what if the Supreme Court, conservative no less, strikes down Trump's tariffs to all of these countries? I mean, he's been using his powers, 8 months, give or take? What if it goes away and up in smoke?
Look, I think it raises some interesting challenges, both institutionally and also politically. Clearly, at a political level, President Trump has a lot of political capital invested in tariffs as the centerpiece of his economic agenda. And if the means by which he prosecuted that particular agenda is found to have been illegal or unconstitutional, he will need to rethink the approach. And that could mean he will look to use other existing authorities whereby he can impose tariffs for other reasons, but those other authorities under different legislation are more conditional. So, how long the tariffs can be put into place, how large they are, et cetera, is more constrained. The other thing, of course, he could do is ultimately give the green light to proposals such as those being advanced by Senators Graham and Blumenthal to introduce the powers for the president to impose tariffs on countries that are purchasing energy from Russia. Now, that's a lot of countries, by the way, including many nations in the European Union that continue to buy a lot of Russian LNG. And so that opens up a very different set of questions, because quite clearly then the issue of tariffs is no longer an economic policy question, if ever it was, and is now well and truly an instrument of foreign policy. Whether or not the Capitol Hill, the Congress will go that far and hand over all the powers unilaterally to a president is hard to tell, because as I understand it, one of the issues that remains unresolved between Graham, Blumenthal and the White House is that the White House wants unilateral authority, whereas the senators don't want that extent of power to be transferred. But that's where I think that could lead to. Institutionally, I think it raises all sorts of other questions too, because it really, I think, puts a spotlight on this question of emergency powers in a general sense and how that is to be interpreted, and whether or not the kinds of issues that President Trump has been arguing for as being national emergencies ultimately warrant the kinds of responses that he's been pursuing in other arenas, whether it's in terms of sending troops into cities or whatever. So there are, I think, quite a lot of issues that this will start to open up, and there's no doubt about the fact that Trump 2.0 has thrown some big rocks into the institutional pond in terms of custom and practice, and he is testing, I think, the extent to which American institutions can hold up in the face of these sorts of what are really political challenges. I think the last thing that will be interesting to watch is should the Supreme Court remain on the side of the appeals court and the lower court prior to that, and come to a view that the tariffs are unconstitutional, how will the political base react? The president has already flagged the idea that the courts are dominated by, left wingers who are opposed to his agenda. I find that quite interesting because, most of the justices are actually not left wingers at all.
Yeah.
But they've been branded, and you can sense that the politics is being readied for a full frontal political attack on the justices of the court on the basis that they're partisan. So how will the base respond to that? The economic problems aren't going away. The problems in the farm sector are still there. We're not seeing a rejuvenation in manufacturing. American households are more indebted today than they've ever been. Inflation is real, contrary to the political claims of the president. And at some point, the promises of America's rejuvenation or the new golden age not coming to reality because people aren't going to experience it. What kind of political reaction is that going to take? Hard to know because, they could actually blame a whole bunch of other people and still rally around the president, whose agenda they firmly believe in. And they will also believe that that agenda is being stymied by, the incumbent institutions of the American establishment. So who knows where this all ends up?
Well, also, Trump may have to, or the U.S. government may have to pay back $159 billion
Yeah.
if indeed the Supreme Court gets rid of this idea that Trump has the ability to do this. That it's going to be disastrous.
It'll be messy to start with. The administration of this has already been a dog's breakfast, right? So, with all the chopping and changing over the last few months about tariff rates, it's caused no end of implementation problems at the coalface. So customs officials are left in a position where their interpretation of the demands are different from one customs officer to another. The requirements are changing left, right, and centre. They're incredibly complex in many cases because we're talking about the application of different kinds of tariffs to different products, questions of how you define which product sits where, how much steel is in a product, how much aluminium is in a product. All of that stuff's created an administrative nightmare for everyone concerned. And then on top of this, should there be a requirement to, in essence, refund the tariffs, well, they'll need a machinery to be set up to do that because people will have to apply, they have to prove that they've paid the tariffs, then they're going to be, have the money refunded. It's a hell. Basically, this whole thing was poorly thought through from not only the sort of macro policy point of view, but also from an execution point of view. I mean, this stuff is rookie error stuff. I mean, if anybody understood the machinery of government administration, you wouldn't have done this in this way because you just know that there's no way that you can convert intention to sensible, smooth implementation reality when you've literally, in many regards, made up your tariffs along the way.
Last question, and I'm sorry for this. My audience member asked a really good question. If I had to pay increased prices to get something, let's say I bought $1,000 worth of things from Amazon, and the tariffs on those items increased the product by 30%, so about $300. Do you get that money back?
Well, in the United States, which is, of course, the most litigious country on the face of this earth, one could imagine class action court cases being prepared, and that would be a very interesting process, wouldn't it? Because there would be millions, tens of millions of consumers across the country who would have an argument to say, I had to pay more on the basis of an illegal tariff. And if the importer or the retailer is getting refunded, or in fact the importer is, it'll cascade. The importer pays the tariff, and then they pass it on. So everyone that they've passed it on will have a claim potentially. What's for the lawyers? come out and begin class actions.
Oh, Warwick, that is fascinating. Thank you for this, man. I always appreciate you. I always enjoy these conversations, and I always learn something. And I argue with my guests all the time, so don't feel any kind of way with me pushing back on it. That point of view of the world is the reason why I want this multipolarity and why I want these countries. I think what Donald Trump did pushing Modi is a great thing for the world, even though it might have been sucked for India at the time. Thank you for this. I really do appreciate it.
Right.
Warwick Powell, adjunct professor of Queensland University, a professor of working at the intersection of China, digital technology, supply chains, financial flows, and global political economy and governance. Warwick, you are fantastic, man. Thank you for this.
Pleasure.
All right. All righty. So Warwick gave a damn good explanation of both of those things, the SEO and the tariff thing. I'm fascinated by both. That world vision, I think, is what a lot of people ideally want. This idea that countries, your security is there where my security is there. And it's not just a country thing, right? It's just reality. If you're secure, then I also should be secure. But if my security is at stake because of something that you're doing, obviously your security is also going to be put into